warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hope you're doing well. Welcome back to my deep dive into my own highlights of the Charlie Kirk assassination saga, fallout, just a overall conversation. And I really enjoyed this post here that was in a reply to Matt Walsh. So it says, so any conservative who commits murder is automatically radicalized by the left? Convenient how your side is never responsible for anything. Now, what's really interesting about this post is that it is quite true to the point of becoming a cliche joke. How if the shooter is a Republican-esque, or white, or heterosexual, or Christian, or grew up around Christians, the sexuality, race, and religion won't be blamed. And I'm sure you've heard this a lot, right? And I've been thinking about this deeply and how this works in propaganda, how you otherize the other people, how you obfuscate, and how you really can be Teflon in your movement when you're able to not hold the same standard you preach to yourself. And so I find it really quite telling how people are starting to wake up to be like, there's a double standard here. Now we have Looney Loomer here, and I want to archive this here because it's important for the record, who she is as a person, her legacy, but also how she's extremely unhinged, mentally unwell, bombastic, and really not intelligent. There's so many women in politics, probably in Russia, China, other countries, who you could definitely, I'm pouring some French press coffee here, say that they have more to offer, more wisdom, more levity than someone like Looney Loomer, because she says here, I'm sick of seeing conservatives say we need more debate and more conversations with the left. No, we don't. These people are evil at their core. The average Democrat is filled with hate and glee over political violence. You can't compromise with communists. You just have to crush their movement and lock them up. Anyone who says otherwise has suicidal empathy. Now, Gad Saad, who's a rabid Zionist as well, feels nothing for the Palestinians. I used to think, before I really understood the Palestinian conflict, back in the day when he was on Joe Rogan, he was some intelligent guy, but it's really, I'm like, oh, no, he's not really nothing. And so her and Gad Saad have been using this phrase recently, suicidal empathy. And it's like where you feel sad for someone to the point where it's at your own detriment. And so here, what is she suggesting? No more talking. No more curiosity. No more open dialogue. They're only evil and they're going to stay evil. So don't even bother talking to them is what she's getting at. And that's with the average. She didn't say fringe. She didn't say militant. She said average, okay? And then she mentioned Democrats. Now, Democrats are almost like the boomer party, to be quite honest with you. They're like people 50 and older. The new generation of left-wingers are our leftists. And then the millennials are like liberals. You're starting to see this, how someone's age plays into what political party they're getting into, at least in America. And Laura Loomer has said terrible things about the Palestinians. She enjoys political violence carried out on children when it's in the name of her faith and in the name of her political philosophy. Zionism is a political philosophy. She's a bad reputation for Jays. I'd be very curious to see what like an old school scholarly Jay says about someone like Loomer. I mean, it'd be quite telling. If someone knows of a video like that, I would love to see it. Now, here we go again with the communist thing. Americans are really afraid of communists. They're deathly afraid of Russia. There was the Red Scare, McCarthyism. So when you use the word communist, it denotes censorship and gulags. I've showed you in previous videos, Ho Math made a reference towards having a gulag and labor camps and rounding people up, so like Gestapo tactics. So you can see, like, wait a minute, you guys scream about communists, but you're more than willing to engage in their behavior. And before, if you recall, when Biden was in power, they were like, oh, these communists are censoring us, we can't say our things we want to say, we're being censored for spicy memes, where Joe Biden's getting R-worded or something graphic. Oh, what happened to freedom of expression? What happened to comedy? And then meanwhile, people are making satire about a political activist, Charlie Kirk, and now they're being deported, trying to have their business licenses removed. There was one lady who, she made a comment about Kirk that was just mildly disagreement. It was one sentence. She was a neurologist and she got fired. And I'm thinking to myself, what if the person who replaces her isn't as good as her? I think there's, and I would love to see in a philosophy class if you could say, hey, this one person said something abhorrent, but they're good at their job, and you need that operation. Would you prefer that person or the person who said nice things but is worse at their job and they're going to do your operation? Right? So someone's speech doesn't reflect their skills at their job, and if the skills at their job are needed, sometimes, maybe, for certain circumstances, you can let that speech go because it's a fleeting moment in history. Within 2 weeks, people will move on to the next thing. So, these medical people who, for some reason, say some of their ideas too openly with their real accounts, and they list where they work, which is quite foolish. They're saying things and they're losing their jobs. You know, this is destabilizing the medical field. And people will say, well, how would I feel being treated by somebody who says these things? Well, you're not going to ask your nurse or your doctor how they felt about Charlie Kirk during that time. In fact, the only questions you should be asking are medical questions to avoid such conversations in general. I'm Muslim. I don't go around asking everyone in the hospital what they think about Islam. If someone gives me salam and wants to reveal themselves as a believer, then that's fine. Okay? But other than that, I'm just, okay, what's my medication? I'm asking medical questions, and then they leave the room, and then I'm with my family, right? So, I find this odd how people are acting like it's scary. I mean, you already know that these people don't like them, you just don't want them to say it openly. That's the thing. And so, here, Loomer is saying, don't have empathy for the left, for the average Democrat. That is incitement. That is tense, violent rhetoric. She has glee over the Palestinians getting harmed. She has said terrible things about undocumented immigrants. She kicks it with some abhorrent people. Okay? There's something to think about. For the last post I just did about Laura Loomer, how she says, it's terrible people celebrate suffering. Well, let us examine this post from her. It says, I'm happy to see Joe Biden suffering. It makes me happy to know he's going to have a terrible time in his final days in office. I'm happy his wife gets to watch him rot away like the trash pile he is and always has been. Today was very satisfying for me. Don't ever forget what Joe Biden and his enablers took away from all of us. Biden doesn't deserve any sympathy. He's a twisted, sick old man, and that's how he will be remembered when he's gone. And that was on the 27th of June, 2024. So I want you to see how she's taking glee at human suffering. She's not having decorum. Okay, she pearl clutches people over Charlie, right? And she didn't... Okay, so people are mad how Erica Trump is being memed for her suffering. But she's clearly happy that Joe Biden's wife, Jill, I believe her name is gonna watch him rot. I mean, think about it. Laura Loomer is one of the biggest hypocrites known. It's almost like she doesn't even care that she has this split tongue. It's quite odd. So I just wanted to bring this to your attention. Loomer deleted this tweet, and I think it's really important to show how so many people won't stand on business. So you can see her flip-flopping. If she really felt this, she would have left it up and said, okay, yeah, he died, but I'm still going to stick by what I said. But clearly she feared the Magatardians revolting on her, so she folded, and this shows that she is not really somebody who can resist the mob, okay? She acts tough, but she's not really about that life. And so I have disagreements with TJ Kirk, Vosh, Destiny. Obviously they don't like Islam, but they didn't fold when it came to their honest views about Kirk's legacy and who he was as a person. Whereas a vulture like Laura Loomer realizes, no, I can delete this. I can capitalize off of his death, act like I was the biggest lover of him, get his audience, so audience capture, and then surf that emotional wave. I mean, it's a clever Sun Tzu tactic in the digital realm. And so here you see, she says, I don't ever want to hear Charlie Kirk claim he is pro-Trump ever again. After this weekend, I'd say he's revealed himself as a political opportunist. That's the irony right there. And I have had a front row seat to witness the mental gymnastics these last 10 years. Lately, Charlie has decided to behave like a charlatan, claiming to be pro-Trump one day while he stabs Trump in the back the next. See what she's doing here? She's trying to put a wedge between Kirk and Trump because Kirk really did work very hard to get Trump in office. And Kirk is more professional than Looney Loomer. Looney Loomer once handcuffed herself. I think it was the Meta office headquarters, because when her Instagram got deleted, she went nuts and she handcuffed herself. I can't remember if it was like the Facebook headquarters or if it was Twitter, but she handcuffed herself, and so she's very unhinged, very deranged. Okay, it's just so bizarre. So think about her agenda here. She wants to be number one. This is two pets fighting. So, on the 1-year anniversary of the assassination attempt on Trump's life, Charlie hosted comic Dave Smith at Turning Point USA's SAS conference, where Dave Smith was able to speak to a bunch of conservative youth at an organization that claims to be pro-Trump. What is she getting at here? Dave Smith is Jewish, so she's mad that a fellow Jew has mercy for the Palestinians. That's another thing. Even though Dave Smith, he's ethnically Jewish, but he's a Christian. He doesn't necessarily live up to a lot of Christian values, but he is a Christian. I've listened to his podcast, Part of the Problem, for a long time. And so I'm very familiar with a lot of his stances. And he's a libertarian. He's not a Zionist, whereas Laura Loomer is a Zionist. Don't forget that the Jays, they have internal conflicts with each other, okay? Just like she would hate Bernie Sanders, right? So there's that. Now, this is a clue here, because we know Loomer works on behalf of Is Not Real, okay? She puts Is Not Real before anyone, alright? And she hates Muslims. Dave Smith showed mercy towards the people of Palestine, and he has criticized Trump, whereas Loomer knows she has to obey the hand that feeds her. Trump is her last political ally. She's so fringe. She's so like a hot potato, like no one wants her around, and the only person left on her team is Trump. Her and Cat Turd are like the weirdest people, because they will never really go against Trump too much. They'll do a little here and there, but not really. As you can see, she's upset that Dave Smith dared to say anything about the Orange Man. She says 3 weeks ago, Dave Smith called for President Trump to be impeached and removed from office over his decision to blow up Iran's nuclear facilities. There it is. Okay? Think about it. I've pointed out how desperately she wants Iran to be gone. If you go on her page, you type in Iran, you will see how many things she has about it. And her best buddy, Satan Yahoo, also for years has wanted to take out Iran. So again, she wants people to turn against Dave Smith, who's a very strong voice when it comes to no new wars. So he doesn't want to go to war for Iran, and he wants to have mercy towards the Palestinians, opposite of Loomer. Okay? Loomer wants to kick back, getting more Botox to look like the Saw character. She wants to have caviar, party it up, and, live in luxury and calmness as your sons are gonna go get, traumatized. That's who she is, okay? And she says here, Charlie played both sides of the Iran issue on his show, as we all saw. Now, what does that mean? He heard both. He's like, okay, what's your point? What's your point? See, they don't like fence sitters. Tim Pool is like the icon of the fence sitters. And no one does better fence sitting than Tim Pool. Okay? He's got so many splinters in his butt, I don't know how he can walk. Charlie actually had conversations. I don't like Charlie, but at least he was trying to have conversation. Now, he couldn't really go towards Nick Fuentes, because I think that his handlers would have been like, no, we don't want anyone hearing someone who's that famous against us Zios getting any spotlight. So no, you ignore him like he doesn't exist. And so he did avoid debating Nick, but Looney Loomer here is pissed that even milquetoast Charlie, when it came to the Iran issue, he wasn't a rabbit enough. Remember, Kirk is the pet of the Zios. He was their number one boy. I mean, I've seen him wear that little hat all the time. And so, think about that, okay? And then he says here, the honorable thing to do is to have a position and actually defend it to the death instead of flip-flopping. Smith said all of MAGA should turn on Trump and abandon him. He said this 3 weeks ago. See the clip below. Turning Point USA is definitely not pro-Trump. If they were, they certainly aren't anymore. So what'd she do? She slandered his entire organization simply for hosting Dave Smith. You see that? Something to see there. Loomer she's unhinged, but I think that she has some advisors who are very pernicious and sinister people, because she tries to put wedges between people, and she's an extreme cult member. Like, if you wanted to be a cult leader, Loomer is like your enforcer. She's like the bottom bitch of a pimp who goes around browbeating all the hoes into submission. That's what she tries to do with the MAGA movement. She's not like classy, feminine, charismatic, charming. She's really screechy. She knows how to get under your fingernails. She makes your hair stand on end. She's unpleasant. She's uncouth. And I don't even think a lot of the Jays on her own side like her, but she's a useful idiot, right? Her tactics of being irate and having a lot of hysteria have gotten her attention. So she keeps doing this. She has a really strong desire to, okay, how can I bump elbows and get to the front of the line? And she does so by worshiping Trump and by attacking people within her own enclave. So, something to think about. Here we see Matt Walsh's tweet, and it says, I cannot unite with the left because they want me dead. They will spit on my grave when I die and laugh in the faces of my wife and children. There can be no unity with such people, but I will unite with anyone on the right. I hereby discard any grudge or personal feud I may have had with anyone on my side. Maybe we will pick up those arguments sometime in the future. Now, we have to stand together. Now notice this. He's calling for unity on the right, and then disunity on the left. But notice how he really seems to show his insecurity here, where he doesn't want to be laughed at. I always found that peculiar. His children would probably be adults at that time. But remember, he hasn't really expressed mourning for the fathers who have been mocked by the Zios when they lost their children, right? He can't. Ben Shapiro has this guy collared, okay? And so I find this deeply ironic that now he cares about children seeing their parents be mocked, but he doesn't necessarily care about children seeing their parents die in Palestine, you see? Joe Biden's grandkids see him get mocked by right-wingers. The right has sexualized AOC in the most vulgar manners. Her future children would probably see that. When the Queen of England died, there were so many memes, and, well, they don't care if her family sees. When Prince Harry and Meghan Markle had their children, and then there was images of them looking like monkeys and other things, Matt Walsh hasn't expressed any concern over Harry's children seeing the racist stuff towards them, or in the mocking of their great-grandma's death, right? So it's performative outrage. You can mock anyone, really, in America, but you just can't mock this particular family, who were the favorite of the Zios, right? And Matt seems to be insecure in himself, that he doesn't want to be mocked in his death. He wants to be loved. If he wanted to be loved by everyone, then he couldn't have gone against the Rainbow Peeps. The Rainbow Mafia obviously cannot like Matt because of how he's gone against their ideology. You cannot expect your enemies to love you. I know Christians have a lot of conversations about loving your enemies, and that's I don't know, I never understood that. If someone dislikes you, you can be like, alright, I still want good for your kids or whatever. But he's ramped up his rhetoric against the cross-dressing eunuchs, and they have a right to not like him. I don't like them. I wouldn't expect them to like me, you see? It's a bizarre mental illness to expect your enemies to, like, flog themselves and throw dust in the air and do a dramatic display to show how much you were valued. That's not their duty. Okay? Everyone will be laughed at by someone. And know what's ironic? Jesus was hated and he was perfect. Why does Matt think that he's above being laughed at? Think about it. A lot of the prophets, may Allah be pleased with them, all suffered. Matt contends to be a Christian. He can see how many of the prophets suffered in his book. I don't know why he would expect special treatment. Here another post from Cat Turd, a grown white man who named himself Catshit and has a cat as his icon. You know, serious person, but he is a top MAGA cult member. And he says here, to all you leftist demons, when we expose you for being the vile pieces of bleep losers that you are, it isn't enough that you lose your job. I hope you become unemployable and end up living in your car. There's no one that deserves it better than you. F around and find out. So notice this. Demons. Okay, very tense language. I hope you realize how much Okay, so the right wing is saying leftists shouldn't call everyone Nazis. They shouldn't call everyone fascist because it leads to extremism. A demon is more extreme than being called a Nazi or a fascist, because a demon is a spiritual creature. And what do the Christians say? Our war is not of the flesh, but it's like a spiritual war. Oh man, I just messed up that quote, but I'm sure the war is not with flesh and blood, it's a spiritual war. So that's a pretty strong insult to call someone a demon, and it trivializes the world. Truly it does. Someone wearing a t-shirt mocking an assassination isn't the same as like somebody who actually has done a physical crime. I've watched a lot of true crime, and some of the atrocities committed towards the elderly and babies and toddlers, that is heartbreaking. And so they misappropriate the word demon and they degrade it, which is quite sad. Now, you can call them losers, alright, and all that stuff, but I want you to also notice the desire that these people not have a job. Remember, the Magatardians were persecuted and they were canceled and they had to hide and create lots of anonymous accounts in order to share their political opinions. That's why they were so happy when Elon took over and when he hid the like button on X, which really increased engagement and made people open up more. And so if you notice, he now, this Tertian, he desires that, you know what, I don't want you to have any type of financial security. Your children and your wife should suffer because you made fun of and said a spicy joke about a political provocateur activist who was friends with the current regime. Huh. And these people, they complain about communism. Huh. It's like, I have learned now that whatever regime takes over, you just gotta survive them. And the rules don't make any sense. The Constitution is officially gone. The First Amendment is not real anymore. It's not real. And it's strange to realize that in a way, but the MAGA people claim to be all about the Constitution. Clearly not. Clearly not. Because remember, there was the case when the Christians didn't want to bake cakes for gays, like gay weddings and stuff. And those businesses were targeted for that, and Christians said that was wrong. You shouldn't force anyone to bake you a cake. That goes against their religious values. But now they are mandating that people not openly show their hatred for someone who hated them. That's a strange thing, isn't it? We have Derek Evans. And I want you to look at the language here. The Democratic Party is a domestic terrorist organization. I want them held accountable. Again, collective punishment. This one guy did something, and they couldn't blame his race. If he would have been Asian, Black, Latino, or Arab, all those races would have got blamed. Now he's white, okay, we can't go towards that. They were, oh, he must be from like a super lefty town. No, I grew up in Utah. And he was raised by a Republican Christian family. Okay, well, now they gotta go towards like party affiliation, which can change each election. And even if he belonged to the Democrat Party, that doesn't mean that everyone within that Democratic Party is now a domestic terrorist. I want you to see how low IQ this take really is. Bernie Sanders says, hey, you need to get universal health care, tuition-free college, and he has a lot of social programs he wants to enact. Trump's big, beautiful bill cut a lot of food programs for the needy. So tell me, who really, when you look at it, is terrorizing the people? One wants to offer more food, others say, you know what, work it out amongst yourselves. You can argue for either or position, but what I'm telling you is how they are wording the word terrorism here, because what America does to terrorists is gruesome. They have black sites, and it's like a dungeon-esque type of thing. So that word is very strong. Notice, they don't want to be called fascists and Nazis, but they use words like demon and then domestic terrorists. So I just want you to see the irony, the hypocrisy, and how they are really trying to get their low IQ followers to finally lash out. Because there are some people who want to be the hero. Okay? And so, let's not play games here. To call someone a domestic terrorist is not a joke. And now I want you to also just see his profile. And he says, you know, he was a January 6th political prisoner, so he's come back with a vengeance, right? He was persecuted for being on those grounds when he shouldn't have. There was a riot, and now he called, in the last post I showed you, the Democrat Party is a terrorist organization. When the Democrats called the January 6 rioters terrorists. They were trying to do a coup d'etat, they felt, right? So here you can see he's got a little bit of farm and garden stuff going on, and it's like, okay, your farm can be taken. So, I remember in Fear the Walking Dead, there was in one of the seasons, they were on a farm, and then the tribal Native Americans wanted to take it back, and eventually it got overrun by zombies. But having a farm doesn't make you invincible, okay? He should remember that. And so, I just thought you should see how some people that really talk tough, and then you realize these are unhinged individuals, and he has so many followers. Someone with 800,000 followers is saying to label all Democrats as domestic terrorists and the Democratic Party. And then they go on different news sites and say, oh, the left has such incendiary rhetoric. And so I want to have this documented for the record. And he calls himself Christian. There are Christian Democrats. So he's calling his fellow Christians domestic terrorists if they have a different economic and foreign policy than himself that isn't even based in the Bible. That's the funny thing. Christians in America go at each other's throats. They don't have this type of unity. Here, Matt Walsh has asserted that the shooter was someone who had a tranny lover. I've heard reports this is still ongoing, but I just wanted you to notice how if the shooter was a heterosexual, not all heterosexuals will be blamed. He wants it to be that it's part of the rainbow mafia so he can use it also towards his own advantage because that's the #1 group who's persecuted Matt. You have to also see with these right-wingers is they all want to be on this sort of mythical list. They all want to be victims, and they want to do audience capture, and they want to link themselves with Charlie and then place a target upon themselves without really deep diving into the accountability, right? So if you look at the data, there's been more heterosexual serial killers than gay ones. And there's also been more essential crimes done by straights than the Rainbow Mafia. Now, not everyone details their proclivities in the bedroom, but I just think it's fascinating how they look for some aspect of a person's personality to then blame entire groups. Now, we have had an uptick in the unfortunate school shooters targeting Christian schools, and this is really sad. It's heartbreaking, really. But we have to remember all the heterosexual shooters as well. And we've had so many that people just forget. The Aurora, Colorado guy, the one who went for the Batman movie, and then the Sandy Hook shooter. I mean, there's so many. But it's not just that, oh, well, you have this sexuality, so therefore you're going to pick up an AK and go after a right-winger. It's absurd. And it really ignores the history of conservative Christian violence. If you add up the bodies of the pagans, the tribal Indians, you can see that clearly somebody has filled a lot of mass graves. I share this with you because I just found it to be blasphemous and disingenuous and insulting and degrading towards the prophet Jesus, peace be upon him. Kirk was not anywhere near that. He saw children in Gaza and told them and his people who followed him, those children don't deserve to be saved and brought to America where there's peace, more peace, and where there's better health care, where there's more food programs. For now there's a decent level of education in public schools, but he wanted them to go to only the nations around, and no child should come to America from Palestine. I don't think that's something that Jesus would say, but I think it's important for us to see the amount of people who are picking at the bones of Kirk in order to make themselves famous. They want the Kirk fans to be like, wow, do you remember how Sky News Australia made a video saying how Kirk is like Jesus? Yeah, that's where we're going to go watch our news now. This is a political move. This is strategy. This isn't genuine. Okay, this is very disgusting. And I think that any Christian who compares themselves to Jesus Christ is insane. And it needs their head examined. Because you're comparing yourself to God, if there's some Christians who believe Jesus is God, and then there's others who say he's the Son of God, and you're comparing yourself to him, that's crazy. You can find things in the prophets that you like. For us Muslims, he was a prophet, but you can't put yourself on the same level at all. And so this is really disgusting and horrendous. Andrew Tate, who is capitalizing very connivingly off of the death of Kirk, as if he was someone Kirk really amplified and wasn't disgusted by. Sure, maybe Kirk was polite to him, but the life Tate lived wasn't the life that Kirk preached to his Christian followers. Tate is a Muslim. Kirk hated Muslims. Tate really loves to just cozy on up to the dragons who torch Muslim lives. I always found this to be quite a betrayal, so the irony of him calling people traitors is palpable. Alright, read here. White people need to... Oh, by the way, for context, he called the shooter of Charlie Kirk a traitor, as in he was a white man who betrayed his fellow white man because he shot a white man. So that's the context of this, and if you go on Tate's page before it like gets buried with his other tweets, you'll see that he called that shooter a betrayer of the white race, pretty much. So here is another post. He says, white people need to stop being mad at blacks and first get mad at their fellow white traitors who advocate for giving away ancestral lands. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created ruins throughout the earth. Land changes hands. There is no land that stays stagnant by race. People move. The wildebeest migrate. Butterflies migrate. Ants travel and make a new home somewhere else. Honeybees can switch their homes. If you look at how animals have migration patterns and really think deeply about this, you can see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made the earth spacious for us to move and travel. If one area has conflict, we can go to another. There's no sin in that. Tate is upholding secular law, atheistic law. Okay? And you're not a traitor because you allow other races into your land. No race has a claim on a land. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala controls all things, and people will move and mix races, and empires will rise and fall, and the shifting will ever happen. You cannot stop it. But again, I don't even think he pays attention to anything Islam says. He just wants to get back into the good graces of the groypers, the white nationalists who hate him. He doesn't have any aura. He's a very confused, sick individual. Okay, so here he says, white people betray themselves endlessly. It's pathetic. 75% of white people beg for more migration. You cannot fight an enemy with traitors in your ranks. So notice here, in Bahrain and Kuwait, they have immigrants who do jobs. You look around the world and you can see how immigrants come in, they do jobs, they eventually become part of the population, and it's just like waves of the ocean, shifting the sands. That is just how it works. Babylon is gone, Machu Picchu is gone, the pyramids of Guatemala and of the Yucatan Peninsula, those peoples are gone. Now there's some Mayans left, there's some people who are indigenous left, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shifts whatever he wills. Okay? The Spaniards came to Mexico, shifts the entire nation towards something else. Think about it. Just look at every country and how they've changed over time. Japan will be one of the prime examples. They're not having kids. It's either collapse or let people migrate. And Japanese women are not going to quit school and have 10 kids each. So the country will be faced with, okay, we collapse, we use robots as much as we can, or we allow immigrants in and the culture changes. That's just the way it is. You're not a traitor to the white race if you don't hate immigrants. Again, Andrew needs to go back to studying the Quran and Sunnah because we don't have this value. But notice, it's so usually the white supremacist Christian nationalists of MAGA and of the groypers. So they're a white Christian sect that believes in white identitarianism, just like the KKK. Again, you don't betray nobody because it's not a sin. It's not a sin to like immigrants. It's not a sin to like other races. To hate your fellow human being because their skin pigmentation is odd. Now, we can all have funny stereotypes about each other, which are great for comedy, honestly, but we cannot hate like that. It's absurd. Because if I think about my favorite comedians, I got Cat Williams. I do like some Dave Chappelle. There's just some hilarious people. Try Rags, Long Beach Griffey. These are people who have made me laugh when I was depressed. How can I hate all blacks? That just doesn't make sense to me. Cat Williams, Try Rags, Long Beach Griffey. They probably cure racism in a lot of ways. That doesn't mean we can't get tired of each other and find funny stereotypes about each other and notice differences. But again here, Tate tries to amplify his mixed race status, but at the same time loves to encourage white people to be more segregationist, and I find that to be quite depraved. I really enjoyed this post because it says, "This is why I have no respect for the Tates. Everything is a play for them. Every famous guy is the subject of their next grift. What could have silently been done in private, the Tates make sure they tell the world, trying to cover their past with moves like these. Only 13-year-olds fall for this trick, Tristan. And what is this? This is when they offered Erica Kirk money. Like, if she needs anything, just let us know." Like the Sopranos had that. When one of their fellow made men would die, they would look after the widow and children, which it's a network. And what's sick is if Erica Kirk had class, she wouldn't accept money from a pimp pornographer. No. Like, there has to be some decorum. You know, you cannot, like, that's like accepting money from a drug dealer, which is terrible to do. And she's already rich. And I've heard that supposedly, but I also have heard people debunk the Tates giving money to the needy. That it's more of like a staged event. But Tate could easily help out so many people in Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, Yemen, Somalia because of the inflation. He could really change lives with Muslims, especially widows, single moms, by paying for stuff over there, because the currency is so inflated. You know, the purchasing power is so weak that a pound goes pretty far. He could sell one of his stupid Bugattis and make life different for the people over there and help the believers. But no, he chooses to help the Kirks who worked against Islam. He wants to give money to people who despised Muslims, who said that Islam is cancer, that Gazan refugees shouldn't come to America. That's who Tate wants to give money to. A very sick individual. So not only is he performing, right, he's like this person said, it's a grift. He's like the people who film themselves giving money to the homeless. Sure, sometimes you can film it genuinely, but you know what's happening when somebody consistently has to show, look how much charity I give. And we know in Islam, sure, you can do some charity openly, but there's also some charity that's done secretly. I recall reading that there was this story, I believe it was a man who lived in Mecca or Medina, and he used to give bread to the poor, and he never told nobody. When he died, everyone figured out it was him because the bread stopped coming. When he was alive, no one knew how many people he was feeding with the bread he left at their doors, but when he died, everyone figured it out. He didn't need to be applauded. And that story stuck with me. And so, subhanAllah, Tate needs to go back to studying the Quran and Sunnah and stop cozying up to the groypers, stop trying to cozy up to the white nationalists. They'll never accept him, and they mock women who race mix. And they have a whole genre of mocking white women who had black sons, and his mom was white who had a black son like him. He serves those who hate him. He has no dignity. Even though he has all the cars and he's oiled up and polished, he doesn't have dignity because he kisses the hand and begs for the approval of those who despise his utter existence. And again, here's the evidence for that I spoke of. They say they love and respected Kirk. I don't recall Tate ever speaking about Charlie Kirk before he died. I don't recall any of that. Maybe someone has a link, but I didn't see anything like that. The way Kirk debated was more civil than Tate. Tate's more punchy, and he wants to be clip-farmed. He knows how to get the views to go viral. He's a dirty, filthy pimp who made millions taking Christian girls and encouraging them to do sin and degrade themselves. Kirk's ideals didn't want women to do adult content. Tate interviewed Bonnie Blue while Kirk was alive and said she was smart for monetizing herself and not giving it away for free. And Tate has also said, what's the benefit of marriage? Where Kirk said, marriage is extremely important. You just gotta look at the values of Tate, his actions, and see that he's a moron, and he's depraved, and if Kirk could speak from the grave and be forced to speak the truth, I really do think he'd be disgusted with the Tates. But maybe he just had that old school Republican decorum of leave it on the golf course, right? But Erica Kirk should keep herself away from taking pimp money, because that's dirty money. And that's money built off sin and degradation, and you don't need to accept money from everyone, especially when you're already rich. And when you're already rich and there's millions of women living in poverty, you don't need more money and you shouldn't accept it. You should have the decency to say, we have enough, there are others who need more, go help them. Everything for us is sufficient, alhamdulillah. Go help the real needy. Okay, but this is class warfare in a way. This is the wealthy donating to the wealthy, getting tax write-offs while getting social clout. Heroes live forever, he says. Yeah, he didn't talk much about him when he was alive. But now that he's dead, look at that, 120k likes. Think about that, 100,000, 26,000 likes. That's a lot. That's engagement farming. That's payday, baby. How many of these accounts are monetized? I would love to see how much money someone gets for posting this, even if they don't believe it. Cash grab. Again, for us fellow Muslims, Christians may get pissed off at this, but they should open their eyes and hear, open their eyes and see, and open their ears and hear what we have to say. Those of us who are going to tell it like it is, that is. Heroes live forever. This man, he didn't want children from Palestine to be rescued and brought to America. He hated Muslims. How can Tate love those who hate the believers? How can you put someone on a pedestal and call them a hero if they didn't want Islam to spread? It's shameful. And we know that Tate's bruv party, as I've archived, says that Islamism doesn't belong in the UK. So he fights against UK Muslims and loves those who hate the believers. And yet I recall how many men attacked me when I didn't believe Tate was genuine. But here's a case in point. See how he picks the bones, peels the flesh to make leather, to utilize every scrap and scrape and piece of Charlie Kirk for his own benefit. Christians should be insulted by this type of behavior, and Muslims should wake up and see just how sick Tate really is. How can I make this all about me? Is probably the first thing Tate thought of. It's not only Charlie, there's a list. They're coming for the rest of us. Okay, let's examine that. There are several theories about why Kirk was taken out. But Kirk served the Zios, and he was more of a mainstream Republican. The crowds he pissed off were numerous, but not the same crowds that have disagreed with Tate. Tate pushes porn. Kirk didn't. Tate is not a real conservative. He's actually a sexual degenerate liberal. So the liberals won't punish him for that. Is he misogynist? Well, that word is overused, but it depends on if you're a sexually liberated feminist who sees sex work as real work, or if you're just mad that he calls women names sometimes and he's rude and loud. You know, he's performative. He's like a WWE wrestler. You don't really take him too seriously. And he's like a GTA character. He's not really real. It's like a script. He also said, I shared it years ago, about 2 years and a half ago, where Andrew Tate said it's gay to have sex with a ugly woman, but it's not gay to have sex with a man who's a passing trans and who has had lots of surgery. So he's into trans. So clearly Kirk wouldn't be for that, right? So who if there's a list, why would Tate be on there? He ain't Christian. He don't live no Christian values. He's a terrible example of a Muslim. He betrayed the Christians by not living up to their religion and getting women to do adult content. And the same when he became Muslim, he didn't promote Islam, but folded like a lawn chair when he realized he'll lose money from some of the donors that he gets. He used it when he was in jail, and then as soon as he got out, he betrayed the believers. Think about that. So, this list he speaks of, it doesn't exist. Because when you make a list, the people have to have things in common. By taking out Tate, that's not the same as Charlie. Charlie was about politics, activism. I don't like any of his politics. But his modality, his ethos, the very essence of who he was antithetical to someone as depraved and gross as Tate. Okay? Tate makes up things as he goes along. He's just not a good person. So, if someone goes after Tate, it would be for entirely different reasons than that guy who went after Charlie. Okay? But Tate is hated by a lot of people, but for different reasons. This is what we must remember. Don't let Tate grift. It would probably be a mafia member who would take out Tate. He often bragged about the Romanian crime. So, it'd probably be something along those lines. Not something to do with him being a hero for decency. And then this made me laugh. It's true. He wants to be included. He inserts himself for, like, any reason.